Today I'm going to show you how I made these two cards with beautiful layering stamps from Altenew. I made the cards as part of the Altenew Educator Certification Program, and they were inspired by the Altenew online class all about layering 4. My name is Julia and I'm an enthusiastic card maker and paper crafter from Austria. Welcome to my channel, Julie's Kreativschatzkiste. The main ingredient of my card today is this layering stamp set Sunflower Daisy from Altenew. It's a really gorgeous set and I use my stamp wheel to stamp it out. Included in the stamp set is also this extensive inspiration guide and layering guide, which was very helpful. I have to admit that I haven't been a fan of layering stamps yet, because I didn't have so much success. But with this stamp set, it was really easy to layer up the different stamps, and the image you get in the end, it's so stunning. I'm really impressed. So I started out by stamping the first layer in the lightest shade of inks from my Sunkissed Delights Fresh Dye Ink Mini Cube set. Then I lined up the second layer and I turned my stamp wheel to attach it to the cover, but I didn't remove the first layer. Instead, I rotated the plate, and so I had both layers at the same time on my stamp wheel. And I used the lightest shade for the first layer and the second lightest shade for the second layer, and I stamped them at the same time now. I did the same with the other layers of the stamp. So I had kind of a clockwork factory. I could ink up all my stamps at once with all the different shades and create multiple flowers at the same time, which is a real time saver, I can tell you. And already now I like the result, don't you? So here you see me aligning the fourth layer of the flower, which is the darkest shade of the inks. In hindsight, I would have taken a bigger paper because I had to leave out the third turn of the wheel because there was no paper beneath it. But even in spite of that, it was really quick and easy because I had my stamps all lined up and ready to go. I really love the result of these flowers. They're so gorgeous. And here they are, my 4 flowers. They're missing the center, but we're going to make that later on because as I had the stamps on my stamp wheel, I had to make the same flowers in blue and in red and even in turquoise. And I'm so impressed with the result. And I had so many flowers in really not a lot of time, actually. Next, I stamped the flower centers, and they are made out of 3 layers, if I remember correctly. I decided to do them without the stamp wheel because I thought I was quicker that way. And they don't need to be aligned that well and still look very good. So these are my flowers with the flower centers. Now I went on to stamping my leaves, and there are 2 different leaves. There are on one hand 1 layered leaves, which you see in the middle here, and then there's another leaf which has more than 1 layer. And of course there's another flower as well, which has 2 layers. And I'm stamping these all at the same time as well, but this time I'm not rotating the entire stamp wheel bit by bit. Instead, I'm just filling half with the stamps. Then I'm aligning the second level of stamps where there are some, and then I turn it 180 degrees and then I stamp the other half. Again, the stamp wheel here saved me a lot of time because I had really a lot of leaves and flowers in a short amount of time. And the only stamp I was then missing was the third stamp of the leaf, but that again I stamped with a stamping block and not with the stamp wheel. And you can see that here. And of course there are the flower centers still missing, which I also stamped by hand in the stamping block. Aren't they gorgeous? I love the result. And these are all my flowers and leaves after cutting them out. See how many I did, and it really didn't take a lot of time. I can never cease to mention that. Next I took my white gel pen and I added some details to the flowers as well as to the leaves. And particularly for these 1-layered leaves, I think they just make the difference because they look so much better if you add these little white accents. I added dots to the center of the flowers, and then I made some lines along the petals of the flowers, just to add some highlights there as well. At this stage I hadn't decided which flowers I'm going to use for my card. It actually turned out to be 2 cards in the end. So now I'm starting with my background, and I use this water-based dual tip markers. I have a piece of watercolor paper here, and I'm just making rough lines in 5 different shades with the markers on this watercolor paper. Then I put a lot of water on the watercolor paper. You see, it's really wet, and I took a brush in order to distribute the color on the watercolor paper. And as you see, The colors really start to moving once they are wet, and I really like this effect. It is actually like watercoloring. I started with the lighter shades, of course, and then distributed the darker shades, and then I dried it all with my heat gun. And as you see, there are still some of these rough lines visible, which I really like, because it adds rough texture to my background. But the colors are also blending together so well. I did another background, but this time I didn't use as much teal colors, so it was a little bit softer. So now I have the background, I have the flower, so I started arranging my flowers on my backgrounds. I chose to do a teal and blue combination on the softer background, and some of the flowers I attached with glue directly to my background, and for some others I used foam tape to create more dimension for my chain of flowers. I also added some leaves on the sides. And this is the finished flower arrangement for my first card. For my second card I used the yellow flowers, which I particularly liked actually. And I think they look just stunning as they stand out from this intense teal and blue background. Again, I glued some of the flowers directly to my card base, and for others I used foam tape, and I added some leaves as well. And here's how my 2 card panels turned out. Do you like them? Let me know in the comments. So now it's time to finish my cards. In order for the colors to stand out even more, I cut 2 matting layers from dark blue, and I have 2 white card bases also ready. For gluing all these layers together, I use liquid glue, and I let them dry for a moment. So as my cards are almost finished, it's time to think about the sentiment as well as the final decorations. For my sentiment, I used the German label love set from Altenew, and I cannot tell you enough how happy I am that there are German sentiments from Altenew, because there are not really that many German sentiments at all, actually. So these say just for you, nur für dich, and Glückwunsch, which means congratulations. So as my cards really turned out beautiful now, I didn't want to risk it all by adding splatter, which is why I opted for the more controlled version in form of drops. And here you see my finished cards. I am so in love with them. How do you like them? And what are your experiences with layered stamping? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed watching the video, please leave me a like, and I would be very glad if you would subscribe to my channel if you have not already done so. See you next time. Servus!